Hello friends, hi, this is Ganesh Nayak. I help finance professionals and students to excel in their career and become a better version of themselves. And I also help students who are preparing for CFA and the FRM exam to clear them in the first attempt. Now, I'm back with one of the video where I'm going to be talking about few important chapters for November 2022 exam. But before I start this video, a quick disclaimer. This is on the basis of my assessment, okay, and on the basis of my discussion with students in the previous exams. This is a trend that I feel that examination can be tested on these chapters, okay. And also, people need to understand that everybody might get a different question set in the exam day. Okay, so the change or the level of questions can differ for students. But at a broader level, when I look at the exam, the intention of the institute or the way they are testing, I feel these chapters can get tested in your exam. So with this, let us start talking about few important chapters from your FRM level 1 exam. Okay, so when we talk about foundation of risk management, which is the first book of the curriculum, okay, over here the very important chapter which all of I've seen everybody, almost most of the students getting the questions on throughout the exam is been the GARP code of conduct. Okay, so you can expect one or maximum two question, okay, from the exam perspective. Okay, now the bad part about this is that these questions, okay, they if they are giving you two questions, they will give you one easy, one difficult. Okay, and also they will be more or less subjective. So you don't, even if you read the textbook, you might not be able to pick it up properly. The only solution to this is solve as many questions as possible to get a better idea about the question and how to tackle it. The next important chapter from your first book, Foundation of Risk Management, is learning from financial disaster. Now, this chapter includes a lot of case studies. This is been a favorite of the institute to test the students with respect to some important case studies like LTCM, okay, metal gazelle shaft, okay, bearing banks. These three have been very important from the exam perspective for your FRM level one. Now, in this book or in this chapter, what they can do is they can ask you one or two questions, okay, primarily related to focusing on single case studies. Say, for example, you're getting a question explicitly asking you detail with respect to LTCM, okay, or metal gazelle shot. But I've seen scenarios in the exam while talking to students that they are also combining two or three case studies and asking about a common trend or common lessons that you must have learned from these two case studies together. Okay, so that can also happen, and that has also been tested in the past exam. So one to two question also I expect from this chapter. Model portfolio theory. Okay, primarily they want to test from the exam perspective the efficient frontier logic, whether you are clear on mean variance framework, whether you are clear on what was the basic concept of modern portfolio theory. Also towards CAPM, they test generally on the assumptions of CAPM. Okay, formula usage, I have not seen many students being asked. Okay, they might twist the formula and they might ask you on the understanding of the formula. Okay, again, one question I feel can come from this exam. Okay, I've also seen that this chapter is combined with regression chapter in book 2. Okay, and they have asked question from that perspective. Okay, they have connected beta and the regression part to it. Okay, how do we get beta? So that understanding is also tested. The next important chapter for your book one is Anatomy of the Great Financial Crisis. Now, the base of this chapter is mortgage and mortgage backed financial securities. Now, in this chapter, Anatomy of Great Financial Crisis, they're talking about the background of the crisis, what happened, how it happened, then what are the lessons that you've learned. Okay, if you look at the overall structure, the lessons that you've learned is very important. How regulators intervened, okay, and how they were able to tackle it, that is also very important. And the precursor, or what was the starting point, or what led to the growth of the crisis, was also somewhat tested in the exam. So you can expect around one to two questions from this chapter also. Now, from the exam perspective, okay, what we can do is now we can go to the next chapter, next book, which is quantitative analysis. Now, in this book, quantitative analysis, the most easiest chapter you will find is fundamentals of probability. Okay, but I have heard that in the exam they are asking one to three questions. In some students, I've got three questions also from this chapter, but those three questions were slightly tough. Okay, and so do not underestimate this chapter only by the basis that you are able to solve the questions or like that. Just keep on reading it, try to understand what is Bayesian's theorem doing, and they might connect this chapter with one more chapter which is multivariate random variable. Okay, connecting both chapter, they can ask you questions. The next chapter, which is common univariate chapter, is also very important from the second book. Over here, they test you on mostly on the normal distribution, confidence interval, student tree distribution, also Poisson distribution, and binomial distribution. The major focus of this chapter is on testing these things. Okay, now you should be clear on all of these pointers properly. Okay, so you can expect one question from this topic to be asked in the exam. Okay, in some cases, what I've also heard that this chapter, the normal distribution logic, is connected with VAR chapter from book 4 and tested in the exam. Hypothesis testing, very, very important chapter from the exam perspective, because if you look at linear regression, multiple regression, those chapters also have some flavor of hypothesis testing. So you should not skip this chapter from the exam perspective. Now, over here in this chapter, the p-value logic, how do you test the basic hypothesis testing for Z and T? How do you calculate test statistic? Then primarily type 1 and type 2 error. All of these are important concepts that are generally tested in the exam in one way or other. More or less, it's theory. They don't test you on the calculation much. Understanding based, what will be your decision for particular problem. Regression diagnostic. Now, why? So hypothesis testing, you can expect 1 to 2 questions. Regression diagnostic. Now, when we talk about regression diagnostic, the idea is that if you're good in this chapter, you would automatically be good in the first two chapters. Okay, and over here, like the if you read the chapter, the first two parts, the heteroscedasticity and multicollinearity, out of that, heteroscedasticity is also very important. Both of them are important for the exam, but out of them, heteroscedasticity, I've heard a lot being tested in the exam. Okay, overall, you should be clear on the concept. You should know in and out about these two things from the exam perspective. You can expect 1 to 2 questions from the exam perspective. Simulation and bootstrapping, historically, simulation and bootstrapping was not heavily tested, and I've seen in the last two exams, in the August and the November exam, they have been testing this. Okay, specifically on the pseudo random number generator part, the standard error part. Please make sure that you're good on this section. Okay, and you're clear on the concepts. Okay, also there is a concept of bootstrapping. How do you do bootstrapping, IID bootstrapping method, or circular bootstrapping approach? These concepts have to be clear. I've heard that they are asking around 1 to 2 questions from this chapter. Okay, so please make sure that you're good in this. The next book we are moving towards is Financial Markets and Products. Okay, in this there is one chapter called Interest Rate Futures. Now, from the exam perspective, what generally they test is the accrued interest calculation. Okay, so if you are good in the calculator part, okay, it will not be tough to look at this section. And also, a lot of times they test you on the clean price, dirty price logic. Okay, clean price, dirty price, and cheapest to deliver. These 3 4 concept is what I have seen being tested more or often in the exam. So you can expect around 1 to 2 questions from this chapter. Next chapter is using futures for hedging. Okay, this chapter is very, very important. If you are revising, then I would definitely suggest look at all the formulas properly, understand what is happening in that formula for this chapter, because I've heard theory-based questions are tested from this chapter. Okay, especially related to optimal hedge ratio. Okay, they're testing it aggressively, and also on the logic of basis. What exactly is basis? How basis is going to impact you as a trader? So important 1 to 2 questions from this chapter. Next, properties of options. Okay, now this chapter, if you're clear on the basics of options, then they would ideally this becomes easy for them to test. Okay, and also over here, the factors which can impact the option pricing becomes important, and also the lower bonds. Okay, lower bond of the option pricing, they are tested. And put call parity is a favorite, so you would hear it about in this in level 1 also, in level 2 also. So these three things, factors, put call parity, and lower bond, very, very important for the exam perspective. Okay, you can again expect 1 to 2 questions. Swaps, I'm directly moving to swaps. Okay, historically we have seen The calculation of swap being also tested, the valuation of swap is tested heavily. Okay, some students have got slightly easy question which can be done within 2 minutes, but some students have got questions which are slightly lengthy. Okay, and when they start doing it, they realize it is lengthy. So as a when you prepare for the exam perspective, you should be clear that whether you'll be able to do this sum within 2 minutes or not. If not, then do it at the end. Okay, but we definitely, I have heard that questions are coming from this chapter. One question for sure I expect to come. Okay, mostly calculation based question. Pricing of financial forwards and future. Historically, this chapter was tested heavily in terms of calculation, but now I've seen that I've heard primarily that a lot of the questions from this chapter or connected chapters are being tested in theoretical format. Okay, for example, they're testing this chapter in the commodity forwards and futures. They're connecting and testing convenience yield and understanding what could be the convenience yield. For example, in this chapter, there's a formula of finding the forward rate, forward price. So, how does interest rate plays an impact? If the present value of the income changes, what is going to happen? All of these theoretical part, they're testing it explicitly in this chapter. Okay, so again, 1 to 2 question definitely I expect from this, and to a certain extent connected with the next chapter, which is commodity forwards and futures. Corporate bond. Okay, now I have never highly suggested this chapter in previous exams, but in the last two exams, I've seen that they are giving theoretical questions and slightly lengthy theoretical questions from this chapter. So better to prepare yourself for the exam from this perspective. Hence, I've added this this chapter from the exam perspective, important perspective of the exam. Okay, let us move towards the fourth book, which is the valuation and the risk model. Again, similar to what corporate bond was doing for book 3, operation risk is important for book 4. Historically, this chapter was not heavily tested, but in the past two exams, I've seen few students getting three questions from operational risk. Okay, one calculation, two theory. That is what they're trying to do. Okay, they're trying to balance it out, but most importantly, they're trying to check your understanding whether you've understood the chapter or not. So I can say that around 1 to 2 question from this chapter. Do not neglect this question chapter. Okay, so make sure that you're good on that concept. Measure of financial risk. You should be clear on the basics of VAR. You should be clear on the expected shortfall concept over here, and that is what the I think so most of the students are being tested on. Okay, again, 1 to 2 questions is the first chapter of your VAR. So again, it is going to be interesting for you to understand the concept. Applying convexity DV01. Okay, now all 3 pointers. Okay, duration calculation, understanding. Okay, then convexity calculation. So not exactly calculation perspective, but understanding perspective how duration and convexity can work together, and most importantly, DV01. What does DV01 represent, and how do we do the hedging? Very very important from the exam perspective. Okay, bond yield and return. Okay, historically this chapter was not tested heavily. Okay, in the past two exams I've seen that students are getting good amount of questions from this. Okay, so you can expect around 1 question from this chapter, and I've explicitly added this chapter because this chapter, if you when you go through this chapter, there's a concept of the dollar roll yield. Okay, that becomes very very important. So please make sure that you don't skip on that part. How does the return decomposition happen? So do not skip that part. Make sure that you're good on that section. The next part, which is option sensitivity Greek. Again, I just want to reiterate over here that institute is not testing you on the formulas of theta, vega, rho. They are not testing on that. Okay, they are primarily testing on how on a different level, that in the money, at the money, out of the money, how different the Greeks are being going to perform. What is going to be their sensitivity? Okay, and what does a particular Greek talk about, especially gamma? This has been tested heavily in the past two exams. So please make sure to not skip this chapter. 1 to 2 question again from this chapter. Measuring credit risk. Historically, WISAC model part, the WISAC calculation, the worst case probability of default minus the probability of default. That formula is very, very important. Tested in the exam. And also the expected loss and the basic idea about the unexpected loss. Expected loss calculation, straightforward calculation has also been tested. Again, I expect 1 question from this chapter. Applying DV01, again 1 to 2 question from this chapter. So this is the overall view of what I expect uh, questions to come from the exam. Again, Nobody can predict what is going to be the pattern of the exam, what is going to be the question of the exam. But this is just from my understanding of talking to students, what can be the questions. Okay, for the students who don't know me, okay, I basically help Intelligence to offer a lot of products with respect to CFA and FRM preparation. Okay, we offer these all products or these all services for students. Okay, next is we also take classroom sessions, we also take live online sessions. There are recorded packages available for students to prepare on their own. Question bank also is provided to the students. Okay, if there is any queries that students might have with respect to the video, you can put it on the comment section. We'll try to address it over there. And also, we would create more such videos for you to prepare better for the upcoming exam. Okay, you can reach out to us in case of any query with respect to your preparation on this WhatsApp number. Please WhatsApp first, and then if there's appropriate point, I'll give you a call back to understand and discuss more. Thank you very much for joining in.